CTBK gives executives and owners of mid-market businesses unparalleled confidence and clarity so you can focus on strategic objectives and organizational success. Their multidisciplinary advisors, accountants, and team members have a wealth of experience and are all available and responsive to each client to ensure the most effective advice, actions, and outcomes no matter the situation or complexity level. That experience base and one-team approach, combined with integrated and efficient way of operating, enable them to be truly proactive partners, doing the best thing for their client every time. Visit ctbk.com or call 716-630-2400 to learn how CTBK can work for you.
Hey, it's your boy Pharrell. I'm a huge fan of Tim Graham and Friends. Then again, who isn't? Shake it, ooh.
Welcome to another edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I'm Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with my co-host Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Sports Plus. And Bills free agency has been big this week. The Sabres trade deadline, post-mortem, the malaise has already descended on the Sabres. Well, I guess it doesn't really descend. Things just didn't change. They still haven't won a game in a long time. The trade deadline didn't change too much, and they're still getting their asses kicked on a regular basis and having line brawls and doing whatever to try to appease their coach or get things going for 2025, 2026. John, you know what? Let's start with the Sabres. We'll get to the Bills and the free agent signings. You've been out there, and I haven't really. Has anything changed really? I mean, we talk about it every week, and I'll use the word again, this malaise. I mean, does the vibe change at all? Has it just become so redundant that everybody's numb to it? And I'm talking about not only from the media standpoint, but maybe just what you're sensing from the fans walking into the building, the hum, the whatever environment is in that mausoleum.
Well, I think the short answer is no. They're still losing and they're still struggling and losing in the same ways. And that malaise has stuck around for much of the season since that 13-game winless streak. But you said they haven't won a game. They did win one game against the Edmonton Oilers at home last Monday night.
Oh,
and
right,
there did seem to be signs of some change coming out of that. Josh Norris, the new player they traded for, they got rid of Dylan Cousins. He made a really nice play to free up the puck and set up Tage Thompson for the winning goal. UPL played very well in that game. They beat Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl when they had power plays at the end and were just taking howitzers that UPL was stopping. There was a feeling of this team is maybe figuring some things out. This is the trade reinvigorated them in some ways just for that night. Now, it didn't occur in the Florida game before that or then playing in Detroit a couple nights later. I mean, maybe you could say this team did something a little different in instigating that 5-on-5 brawl at the end of the game, something that you didn't see from the Sabres at other moments in this season. But overall, it doesn't seem like there's a lot that has changed. There was an interesting bit of a situation with Rasmus Dahlin this past week.
Paul Bissonnette on the Spitting Chicklets podcast talked about Rasmus Dahlin wanting out, and the Sabres were very aggressive in trying to kill that story. What'd you make of the response to the story from a journalism standpoint?
You mean that the Sabres were very quick to put out a graphic with his quote to promote denying
yes.
the story? I actually kind of liked that. I thought the Sabres and Dahlin got in front of it to, I mean, I'm always for open communication and honest communication and being honest with your fans and the media and the public. And I think the Sabres did that. And I like that they didn't hide from that. Or sometimes you see teams when they want to deny a story to just deflect and not comment on it or not have anything to say. I listened to Elliot Friedman's 32 Thoughts podcast today. He got a little more detailed into it, seems to understand what happened in that meeting, maybe a little better than Paul Bissonnette did. I think there were some misinterpretations over what Darlene said or his beliefs coming out of that meeting. Elliot Friedman kind of explained it as Darlene liked what he heard from Kevin Adams, went in with some concerns about, what's the direction here? Why aren't we winning? What's going to happen in the future? But seemed to like what he heard from Kevin Adams. That's the way Elliot Friedman explained it. I think maybe the message got mangled a little bit, and then it got back to Paul Bissonnette, how that meeting transpired. And that's kind of what Darlene said, that they had a meeting, they talked about the future, the plan, and his concerns about losing, but that he never asked for a trade and that he's not dissatisfied here as long as they can figure out a way to win.
That's a big caveat.
Well, it does remind me a bit of how things went with Jack Eichel. I think Jack Eichel had expressed concerns about wasting the prime of his career in Buffalo before he got irritated enough to make trade requests and get to a point where the Sabres had to trade him. And Rasmus Dahlin's not at that point yet, but this is, step one or stride one towards getting to that point if they're in the same position in last place or losing a year from now.
That's the fear that all Sabres fans have regarding the team and its dysfunction, is that regardless of the number of young, talented players that are on the roster, and you can quibble as to whether or not there are too many of them, not enough experienced veterans, the analytics that show that too many young players just don't make the postseason because you need seasoned players sprinkled throughout the roster to bring the young players along and to establish various things and to help a team that could be volatile due to its youth. You need some of those experienced players to help steady the ship, to get you through rough patches, to make sure a 5-game losing streak doesn't turn into 13, or that you go 1-6-1 over your past 8 games, which is what the Sabres have done. So yeah, we can debate that. That's a different discussion. But with all those young players that the Sabres do have, the concern is, do they just get to the point where they can't wait to leave? And whether it's by demanding a trade or just not signing an extension or whatever pressure you can build within the organization to force any kind of change. We've seen it with young players like with Jack Eichel, who is coming back to town here. Wait, am I reading the schedule right? That's coming
tomorrow,
up, right?
Vegas is here tomorrow.
Yeah, that's tomorrow night.
Saturday.
Can change your coach. I don't think that Rasmus Dahlin went into Kevin Adams' office and said, "Look, if you don't get rid of Lindy Ruff, I'm gonna be a problem around here." But these are the things that you do have in the back of your mind as you try to embrace as a fan these young players and buy the jerseys and try to find your optimism for the future. That problem of whether or not these guys are going to be here because they don't want, because they just get sick of it. And so when you see this report from Paul Bissonnette, obviously alarm bells go off. But I think that even as you mentioned, Jonah, the explanation is still troubling. That you don't want your young players. Yes, I guess you could say you want him to care and you want him to go into the office and to use his leverage as a talent on this team to motivate the front office or to be a catalyst of some kind, to let his feelings be known. I don't begrudge him for that, but it's still, this is the same season in which the owner went to Montreal to give them the pep talk, and the general manager trying to give his pep talk and having it backfire, and whatever mixed messages you get about a team that is craving discipline, which is what we heard all last offseason, and why Lindy Ruff came into the organization and tried to instill discipline and accountability that the players said they wanted, that they claimed to have, that they desired, but yet playing like a group of guys who don't care for it, or that they don't pay enough attention to it. They don't embrace it, clearly. You see the bad turnovers and the bad penalties and the letting games get away and just the fragileness, the fragility, I should say, between the years. And I don't know, it's a confusing time to be a Sabres fan, and it has been for a long time. But over the course of years, you're supposed to have answers and direction and at least get some sort of idea of what direction they're going, even if you disagree with it. But it just seems like they're making it up as they go, with the exception of sticking with youth. But again, to come full circle on my point, the more as it sticking with youth to the point that they just continue to lose and get sick of it becomes counterproductive.
Well, let me react to a couple of your points there. The idea that, the Sabres veteran players being tired of losing and the culture and wanting out, we've talked about that before, and I've heard a lot of discussion about it, and it's a fair assessment. But, Jason Zucker signed a contract extension. Jordan Greenway signed a contract extension. Those were two veteran players that could have gone to unrestricted free agency and found better teams, and probably could have been traded last week if they didn't sign extensions. And they both decided to, redouble with the Sabres. There's been speculation that maybe Alex Tuck doesn't want to sign a contract extension because of the losing. I don't think that's the case. I think he wants to be part of the solution here. He'd probably rather be even more invested. I think he'd like to be the captain if he could. And as long as they offer him the right financial terms, I think we'll sign an extension here. And Rasmus Dahlin is in the first year of an 8-year contract. He doesn't really have a great contractual leverage point to demand a trade quite yet. So I don't really think that him demanding a trade and being traded, I think that's several years down the line. And it just seems like I think the players here still want to stay here and win here. But I think my interpretation of Rasmus Dahlin meeting with Kevin Adams is sort of asking why. Why are we losing? What's wrong? How do we get better? Because it seems like we have the players and we've been building, and it's not happening. We've changed coaches and it's not happening. Rasmus Dahlin's the captain, and they're trying to play different ways, and it's not happening. The thing the Sabres need, I don't know if they have players that want out, but they need more players that want in. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know if the players can go to their agents or recruit within the league or find ways to get some of these players with no movement clauses to consider Buffalo or free agents, but they need more veteran players to come in and help bring this team along and, get them over the hump. And development of the youth. Sabres fans are tired of hearing that they're the youngest team in the league and using that as an excuse, but as they age, as long as they can avoid continuing to be the youngest team in the league and getting even younger, that should pay off. The Sabres have young players that the rest of the league seem very eager to trade for. JJ Peterka, even Dylan Cousins, that they could sense that the Sabres had more talent than they realized, or that, they were circling the Sabres and wanting to take some of these young players off their hands. And they traded Dylan Cousins, but they hung on to JJ Peterka. And I still do think there's a way that this team can mature into a winning team. But I don't know how, because it's been several years that they haven't been able to do that, and several different coachings and resets. And the biggest takeaway I had from the last week, the trade deadline maneuvers, and then even the meeting with Rasmus Dahlin and the fallout from that, is that Kevin Adams is going to be the GM of this team next year and in the offseason and going into next season. Probably means Lindy Ruff's going to be the coach too. They kept a lot of, they re-signed Zucker and Greenway. They're going to keep a lot of players on this team and most of the same roster. They might try to add to it and really going to run it back. I think Kevin Adams' behavior was, and the way he talked about the trade deadline, was of a GM that expects to be here next year and is still building towards the future. And if Rasmus Dahlin thought there was going to be a change in the front office, he wouldn't be meeting with Kevin Adams to find out what the plan was for the future. He'd be meeting with ownership or waiting until there were a new front office person for him to have that
Maybe.
meeting with.
I mean, maybe he doesn't know. I mean, and
Maybe he doesn't
he,
know. Right.
it doesn't, that could be something that a player, and depending on how the organization views its leadership council, I don't think that we could ever take what happens with the Bills and apply it to how the Sabres operate just because Terry Pagula happens to own both of them. They're just totally different cultures and structures and environments.
Well, yes,
Totally.
but the idea that Kevin Adams was a lame duck general manager that might have been fired over the Super Bowl break or the Four Nations break that coincided with the Super Bowl when we talked about it, or wouldn't be allowed to do much at the trade deadline and wouldn't be the GM next year. That's not a belief in that locker room if the captain is meeting with the GM about,
Well, you still got to
what's
meet
the
with
future.
somebody. I mean, if you got to talk to somebody, and if you're sick of it, and then you either that or you wait months. And so I think that if Darlene is confused about, hey, why are we losing? Let's get to the bottom of this. That also is indicative of an organization that must be confused, because they should be communicating these things to their players. And if Rasmus Dahlin needs clarification as to what our goal is here and what our direction is, what are we up to? He is the captain. This isn't, um, you know, this isn't, Zach Benson, ordering a meeting with the general manager. This is the captain. He's been here for a long time, number one pick, best player on the roster, probably. And you would think that at some point you'd have these conversations, whether it be with Lindy Ruff or all three of them sitting down. Again, like, I don't want to, the Bills have that leadership council. So I don't want to say that that's interchangeable, like the Sabres have the same thing, but he is the captain. This is the guy who's supposed to be communicating these messages to the dressing room on not only a seasonal basis, but on a day-to-day basis. I mean, this is the guy the players listen to. He's the captain for a reason. And this is somebody that you should have in your, at your bosom, so to speak, as the general manager or the head coach. So if Darlene's confused, that to me indicates that the organization's confused. Is it a great sin? No, I do think it's healthy. Obviously, if it's something that he felt that needed to be done, I'm glad that he did it. It's constructive, but that it's gotten to this point in March. Anyway, it just kind of makes me roll my eyes a little bit. The other thing I wanted to mention, you say, and I agree with you, they need more players who want to be here, who want to buy in. And I know we keep going back to the palm trees comment, and we will for eternity. That will be that will cling to Kevin Adams forever. But the Bills have signed a bunch of players who played with the Rams and the Chargers just during this free agency. They've gotten a lot of players who are choosing to leave Southern California to come and have a chance to win a Super Bowl. The Sabres, to me, again, I'm not around them every day. I'm not talking to them. So this is from a distance. But to me, at this stage of where things are, so many years of not making the postseason, 14 years and counting, it's almost like you wonder if these guys are just happy to be in the National Hockey League. They're not necessarily Buffalo Sabres. They're in the National Hockey League. And that's what it used to be for the Bills during the drought, during the Dick Duran era, the Chan Gailey era. You never got a sense that these guys were Bills. They were just NFL players. Like, they could go home and they could talk to their buddies and their family members that, hey, I'm in the National Football League. Well, yeah, you're with the Buffalo Bills. Technically, you are in the National Football League, and collecting a paycheck and getting your accrued season towards your pension and all these other things. And I don't know, just the pride of being a Buffalo Sabre, it just doesn't resonate. And it doesn't, maybe there is some of that, but they don't articulate it. They certainly don't show it on the ice. A lot of times it's a team that just seems like it's going through the motions, and they're just happy to be in the National Hockey League.
Well, you remember building around the players that want to be here was kind of the rallying cry of the Sabres 3 or 4 years ago, coming out of Ralph Kruger being the coach. And
Alex Tuck, was a hero.
Well, the face of that was Dylan Cousins, if I recall. He was the first player that Kevin Adams drafted in the first round. He was a young player who, I think in his rookie season at that point, but there was, the Zoom calls. This was during COVID, in the locker cleanout Zoom calls. Jack Eichel had expressed, who was the captain at the time, he elaborate on his injury situation and the disconnect with the team over that. And that was the beginning of the end with Jack Eichel on the Sabres, or that season was the beginning of the end. And Dylan Cousins was the player I think that the Sabres had put up there as this is the new, not the captain or the best player, but this represents what the Sabres are about now. Young, talented players that want to be here and want to be part of the solution. Now the Sabres have given up on him. Dennis Gilbert, a Buffalo native who certainly wanted to be on this team and wanted to be a part of the culture, and the guy who stuck up for Tage Thompson 2 days later, but the one that went out there and fought somebody and did what the rest of the team
Loyal
wasn't.
soldier.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
that's the cloth that he's cut from. That's his family and the whole thing, and whatever Lindy says, and he's going to go out there and do it.
So perhaps what Rasmus Dahlin was asking Kevin Adams about was, uh, you know, why did we get rid of two players that we like in this locker room and we believed in as teammates? I think maybe they didn't, but I think they did. And Kevin Adams had to explain why Josh Norris is going to help the team in a way that they needed to get rid of players. Because I think if you're a player on the Sabres and you're looking at what moves the Sabres need to make at the trade deadline, you're thinking, let's trade draft picks and prospects and minor leaguers that aren't here yet for guys that can make our team better and add to our lineup, not take away our number 2 center and a defenseman that's, I think, useful to the other defensemen playing alongside him in order to get a new player. But if Josh Norris makes that much of a difference, then maybe that trade is worth it.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And that mentality or that sentiment, absolutely. What do you think can happen here in the last handful of games that changes anybody's perspective about next season? Or does everything have to happen in the off season, whether it be some sort of change to the front office, the coaching staff, the roster? Can anything really happen in the games that would help fans, or you even in the media, me in the media, observers in general, overcome the feeling that is now seems pretty damn near cemented as to what 2024-25 is and will be remembered in Sabres history?
Again, short answer, no. I do think the Sabres can change some of their own self-belief and confidence with a strong run down the stretch. If they can win, whatever, 14 of the last 20 games or something like that, and look at themselves and say, hey, we played at that high level for the last month of the season. We can do that next year for a full season. If they have more wins like they did against playoff teams, the Edmonton Oilers the other night, they can point to that and say, hey, if we can play that way and beat those teams on that night, we can do that more next season. So I think within their locker room and within their own culture, they can maybe change some perception, but I don't think there's really anything that they can do to change how the fans feel about the direction of the franchise and the front office. I think they're going to have a very hard time selling season tickets and tickets in general, because they're not going to make any change like they did last year with the coach, I don't think, and have a different face to sell. And, maybe they can get a free agent or an offseason trade that gives them that kind of marquee player that gets the fan base excited, but they've not been able to do that in previous off seasons, and I'm not so sure they'll be able to do it this time.
Has the Bills' moves in free agency over the last week, how has that moved the needle with that roster? I'll just give my thoughts. I don't think it's moved the needle much at all. And a couple of reasons for that, both positive and negative. I think that when you look at what the receiver room did last year, and the questions that we were pounding, the content, we're in that part of the season where it's content for context's sake. It is mock drafts, all the different free agency possibilities, and is this guy coming? The Max Crosby and Myles Garrett discussions all went up in a puff of smoke when they signed their extensions with their teams. A lot of wasted breath this time of year when it comes to the National Football League, but it keeps us all in business. But last year, the wasted breath turned out to be, what are the Bills going to do at wide receiver without Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis? And of course, we learned that Josh Allen, as long as he's the quarterback, they're probably going to be okay, and receivers are going to produce. And yes, the Bills did feel compelled to go out and get Amari Cooper during the season in a trade. His production wasn't much, although yes, his presence on the field did do things to the defense that opened things up for other players, and the offense did get better and more productive. But in terms of him specifically, there's not a lot of production that will need to be replaced. And the Bills have not been aggressive in, as far as we know, in trying to re-sign him. Amari Cooper is still unattached. He hasn't signed with anybody. Maybe he's got too big of a price tag and everybody's just waiting for that to come down. But um, the reason I'm mentioning that is I feel like the team is in good shape in most places, especially on offense. So losing Mac Hollins is interesting to me. I didn't anticipate that, only because he seemed to really enjoy his time with the Bills. And he was such an important part to a really good team. To see him go to the Patriots was a little puzzling. And he's also a really good special teams performer. So you do need to replace him in some ways. But I do think that Josh Allen as the quarterback is going to take care of all that. The offensive line is intact. James Cook is back, unless something happens with him where he decides that he wants to make a statement regarding his contract. He's been pretty vocal about that on social media and wanting the $10 million a year. There's been no indication that he's going to miss workouts or excuse me, he's going to miss mini camp or any of that stuff. So I just think that the offense, which makes this team go, is in good shape. They obviously have holes to fill at cornerback and defensive tackle. I'm not a huge fan of the Joey Bosa signing. I think that's a scratch-off lottery ticket, and it could pay off. I think it's low risk. But the defensive backfield has some work that needs to be done. Damar Hamlin re-signed despite getting a new agent. That would indicate to me that he tested the market, didn't like what he saw, came back to Buffalo. Everybody, Bills fans, I should say, I don't want to say everybody, but a lot of Bills fans wanted to see an upgrade there. And you're going to have obviously Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop in that role. Taylor Rapp gets hurt a lot though. So anyway, that's just me laying it out so far with the various moves. It seems as though there's just a lot of spackling involved so far with the various needs that the Bills have, as opposed to the big acquisition that I think more people were maybe hoping for, especially when you're talking about names like Max Crosby and Myles Garrett.
Yeah, well, I think those were fantasies that the Bills could make those type of moves. I mean, look, didn't Max Crosby and Myles Garrett both sign mega extensions to stay with their teams and were never really on the trade market to begin with? And
Right. Well, that's wasted breath season.
Yeah, exactly. And the Bills, for the compensation they had to give up in the trade, plus the contracts and the cap, I don't think those were ever feasible moves for the Bills to make. And a lot of the free agency wish lists weren't feasible as well. I think overall, the Bills were one of the very best teams in football last year. They've been one of the very best teams in the league for several years. They have the second highest paid player in the league, the second highest paid quarterback, and in some ways with the guaranteed money now, he has the biggest contract.
They re-signed both of their captains, which is, right, I think, symbolic. Yeah. That's part of your infrastructure, bringing back even Ty Johnson.
Yes, they've locked up
to a 2-year deal. That's not huge, but he's an important player.
Yeah, they've worked ahead on locking up guys that would be free agents next year that are important players that they've drafted and developed. And I don't know if they got bargains, but I think they got fair deals and aren't overpaying for really any of these guys. And James Cook, they haven't signed yet, but I think maybe they, unless they decide they don't want to pay a running back, I think they'll get something done with James Cook.
Khalil Shakir, another infrastructure guy, and he signed so early in the process that he gets left out of these discussions. But let's not forget that his extension also, I think, sets a tone about re-signing your own, keeping your good guys, keeping your playmakers, your good.
Yeah. So for a team that was one of the most talented and I think stocked rosters in football last year and got to the AFC Championship game and was one of the very best teams all year long, to pretty much bring everybody back except for Von Miller and the punter and be able to add a few more pieces around that, I think is a major win. Even if they didn't add much in free agency, I think just keeping that kind of team together under the cap with a very highly paid quarterback and a bunch of players now that are making higher end contracts for their position. They're not too many of their best players are on rookie deals anymore. And to be able to keep this group together and really run it back with one of the best rosters in the league last year is a win. I like the Josh Palmer signing. I think he brings a skill set and something to the offense that they were lacking and could do a little bit of what Amari Cooper did, but also more of what he didn't do in making the overall offense better, even if he's not a number one productive receiver. And Joey Bosa, I kind of agree with you. I don't have high expectations. You said you're not a big fan of it. I think I'm a small fan of it because I think the risk reward
I think
ratio is good.
I would say I agree with you. We talked about it before we came on the air. I'm in agreement with you. I didn't want to say I'm not bad. I'm not a fan of it. Like I'm against it. I think it's fine. I just don't think it's the answer.
Mm-hmm. I think this 1-year contract for Joey Bosa at the money they're paying him is better than the 6-year contract they gave Von Miller. And I think having Joey Bosa on this team next year is better than what they've gotten out of Von Miller and Von Miller's contract the last couple of years. I think he might be a better culture add than Von Miller, even though there's some ways where it seemed like Von Miller really helped the Bills culture and in speaking to the fans. But, peel back the curtain a little bit. I don't know if he was the best influence in that locker room for the duration of his time with the Bills. And I think Joey Bosa might be better, might be worse. I don't know. But, kind of liked what he said at his press conference. And I think he's here to win. And I think he's here to, as he said, be immortalized in Buffalo by being a missing piece. I think his health and the fact that he hasn't really been Pro Bowl caliber Joey Bosa in a few years could make it, I don't think it's high risk. I just don't know if the reward's really going to pay off.
Yeah, he hasn't played a full season since 2019. Now, granted, he did play 16 games in 2021. That's the 17 game schedule. So he missed one game. Right? 2021 was a 17 game season. Let me just double check that before
I think you're right, but some teams, I don't know. Did teams not play all the games that year because of COVID? I don't remember.
I don't. No, that was 2020, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, they played. The Chargers did play
restrictions
17
as well.
games that year. Okay, now you had me second guessing it. He did make the Pro Bowl last year, 14 games, 9 starts, but he had 5 sacks, 13 quarterback hits. That just seems to me like a reputation award there. Or maybe they thought they were voting for Nick Bosa and gave some votes to Joey instead. I mean, he's 30 years old. He'll be 30 in July, and he just doesn't play a lot. And he played only 9 games in 2023, 5 games in 2022. He had that 16 game season in 2021, 12 games in 2020. Played his most recent full season was 2019, 16 game season. 2018, he played only 7 games. So yeah, I don't recall who posted it, but there was a graphic of a combination of the Chargers and Bills pass rushers and how they did last year in terms of pressure percentage, getting after quarterbacks with things like hurries and hits and, not just straight sacks. And he would have been a little bit above average as a Bill. And he would have been below Greg Rousseau. And I think that everybody takes a look at the Bills' edge rush production and all of the assets that have been committed to the edge rushing role on the Bills that Brandon Beane has allotted, whether it be Von Miller through free agency or all the high draft picks on Greg Rousseau and AJ Epinesa. And you just don't see the production that you'd want to see. You'd want to see a menace in that role, a player that teams just fear on Sunday afternoons. And the Bills they've tried desperately to get that guy and just can't get one. And yes, Joey Bosa has shown flashes of being that guy, but I think that Greg Rousseau, if you take a look at the situation, if you were to ask the average fan who had a better season last year, Greg Rousseau or Joey Bosa, based on just percentage production, not on volume production, I think everybody would say, well, it had to have been Joey Bosa. but he underperformed Greg Rousseau. And Greg Rousseau is a good player. He's a good player.
Mhm.
But like I said, with all of the assets that have been dedicated to that role, the Bills should have something formidable in that role by now.
Yeah, and I don't think they're bringing in Joey Bosa to be an every down starter on the defensive line. He's coming in to play the role that Von Miller played
Oh,
last
for
year,
sure.
third down. And so I
He
think what
played
he
only
needs to do,
50% of the snaps last year. Not 50% of the snaps in terms of games played, but of the games he was in, he played 50% of the snaps. Now, in his prime, he was playing 2019, he played 86% of the defensive snaps. In 2021, he played 77% of the defensive snaps. Each of the last 3 seasons with the Chargers, he's played 54, 51, and 50%, descending a little bit. So he's on the field only half the time.
yeah, he needs to be more effective than Von Miller, and specifically more effective in playoff games against the Chiefs. And Von Miller actually had a pretty good year if you look at the underlying numbers and getting into the backfield and pressuring the quarterback, but didn't get home quite as often. He had some sacks. He had some sacks, I think, in some meaningless situations. He didn't have as many, I think, big impact sacks in tight games. And they need Joey Bosa to do a little bit more of that. But there's also, they signed Michael Hoyt, who's not going to be a double-digit sack type guy, but he's going to augment the interior pass rush. Javon Solomon in his second year might give them a bit more. Dwayne Carter, healthier than he was as a rookie, could add to that. I think the collective, the Bills need a better pass rush and a better pass rush in those important playoff games. And all of that together might be better than what the Bills finished last season with, or it might be about the same. I don't think they've gotten any worse, and I think there's potential to be better in that regard.
So I have that graphic here in front of me, and it was posted by Joe Marino, the wonderful Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast. He posts a lot of good stuff on social media too, and he had posted this screenshot of Bills and Chargers edge rush metrics, and of the 8 top players, Von Miller was number 1 with a win percentage of 18.4%.
Yeah, but watching the games, did it ever feel that way that he
No,
was
well,
their most terrorizing
this is
pass
what's
rusher?
going to my
Yeah.
point of, if I'm a Bills fan, I need a lot more. I want Brandon Beane to dedicate more. And I'll get into my answer to this question in a little bit, but let me just go through this. So number 1 was Von Miller. Number 2, Greg Rousseau at 14.6%. Khalil Mack was at 14.5%. He's a Charger last year. And then 4th between the 2 teams would be Joey Bosa, and then Tuli Tupelotu. Then you have Dwayne Smoot 6th, AJ Epinesa 7th. So the Bills in this list are 1st, 2nd, 6th, and 7th. And Joey Bosa was not as productive as Von Miller last year. Now he was in on 347 pass rushes compared to Von Miller's 249. So there's more volume there. He also committed 8 penalties. Is that committed 8 penalties or did he draw 8 penalties? Because if you draw on 8 penalties, that's pretty impressive. Let me
Well,
just
while you're looking that up, I mean, I guess I'm repeating a point I made, but maybe make it again. They don't need Joey Bosa. The Bills don't need Joey Bosa to get 12 sacks and be an all-pro player and have a superstar season. They need Joey Bosa to be a pass rush weapon that gets some sacks and some pressures and some big plays in the postseason in January. And I think he's capable of doing that, but I think that's where the risk or the lack of reward might come in because of his health history. It's not going to be a good signing if Joey Bosa has 11 great games and then gets hurt on Thanksgiving and isn't available in the playoffs, or if he breaks down for the long season. So it's really a signing for the playoffs, and the Bills need to figure out a way to manage his workload and the training staff to keep him healthy. And even if he doesn't have great PFF numbers all year long, have him be at the peak of his powers and effective and useful in the postseason, and then it's worth every dollar the Bills have given him.
This is interesting. I don't know if this says anything about Joey Bosa and his maybe lost a step, but he did commit 8 penalties last year in his 14 games, all of them defensive offside or a neutral zone infraction. So trying to get a jump.
One thing that Von Miller was good at was being offsides, it seemed all the time and never getting called for it. He had that jump down perfectly.
Yeah. Joey Bosa had trouble with that last year. What I think that the Bills need to do with their pass rush is defensive tackle. And that's what I saw in watching the Eagles against the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. And I know that we talked about that on the podcast before about the blueprint and whether or not you should actually obey a blueprint, particularly against a specific opponent, to get past that opponent, because sometimes you find yourself gearing up for that one opponent and you dilute yourself, or you make yourself a little bit more vulnerable against, the everybody. And so I think that when you look at the what Vic Fangio did without blitzing in the Super Bowl, and all the pressure that was on Patrick Mahomes, and of course the knee-jerk reaction is to say, "Wow, edge rush," but that wasn't the case. The Eagles dominated at defensive tackle in that game, and it helped the edge rushers get some numbers. But they came up with, I don't know if I have that in this notepad or not. They went with a 4-man defensive line rush, of course, the entire game. Like I said, no blitzing. Yeah, Davis, Carter, and Smith, and Ajomo, the defensive tackles. Ajomo, I'm adding him. He played 25 defensive snaps. But that quartet had 8 tackles. 3 of them were sacks. They had another tackle for a loss that wasn't a sack. They had another quarterback hit that wasn't a sack. And then, of course, they had that strip sack recovery um, that Williams was able to pull off. And those guys were drafted high. They were drafted in the first round back-to-back years. They're very young. Meanwhile, the Bills drafted Ed Oliver a long time ago, it seems like, and then didn't draft another defensive tackle until Dwayne Carter, who was a healthy scratch in the postseason. And they've tried to just kind of get guys in there. Daquan Jones was very effective before his injury in London in 2023, but it was, guys like Tim Settle and Star Latulele, and I don't know, I'm name, so throw some guys in there. Jordan Phillips 5 different times, or however many times they signed Jordan Phillips. So anyways, that's a neglected position that I think that the Bills really need to address, and don't think that they really have yet so far in postseason or in the
No, I mean,
offseason.
I do think Michael Hoyt could be an underrated signing for the pass rush. He's a guy that's been listed as a linebacker and a defensive tackle in his career.
Right.
Probably
Yeah. Yeah.
slides in as an edge rusher right now, but I think he'll play that Dwayne Smoot role where he's inside and outside and passing downs, pass rushing from the inside. He might not be helpful for the Bills defensive line against the run as much as he is against the pass, but on passing downs, he could be an effective interior pass rusher. And I think with Bosa, with Hoyt, with Javon Solomon and Dwayne Carter being, not rookies anymore, I think the Bills have more potential for an 8-man rotation of good pass rushers and having a better collective pass rush, even if I don't know if any of these guys, except for maybe Greg Rousseau, but Greg Rousseau has yet to really reach that superstar pass rusher level, and the Joey Bosa might be past that level. So they might not have the one player that gives them the impact they thought they were getting from Von Miller a few years ago, but the 8-man pass rushing rotation might be better.
Larry Ogunjobi is a defensive tackle. I don't know that we've mentioned his name yet on the podcast. Of course, he was signed, but he's going to be 31 in June, and he's coming off a season in which he played 15 games for the Steelers, started 12. He's a pretty durable guy. He hasn't missed many games in his NFL career, but I don't know that he's a difference maker at this stage of his career. But again, I think maybe what we should learn from the wide receiver discussion at this time last year is that we really don't know. And we can go based on track record, and the Bills really haven't been able to evaluate those needs and address them effectively, really throughout Brandon Beane's tenure. And Sean McDermott. I don't want to just say Brandon Beane, but Sean McDermott's got to coach these guys up and develop and do all that kind of good stuff. It's just been a vulnerability, and clearly is is what I think is the priority this entire offseason. I just don't think we've seen enough yet, and we'll be talking about it for the coming months. Jonah, I want to talk about March Madness as it relates to the Western New York college basketball community. It hasn't gone well for the big schools. The smaller schools, however, going very well.
Yeah, it's March Madness. It's, my favorite time of the year, a lot of people's favorite time of the year for everything that's going on in basketball. If you talk Buffalo sports with the Sabres trade deadline, the Bills free agency, the Bandits right in the middle of their season, UB football starting spring practice, having their pro day yesterday. The Bison start playing in about a couple weeks. Everything's happening all at once here.
Oh, real quick, I know you were out there. UB linebacker Sean Dolak had his pro day yesterday. People were raving about it, but what did you see?
I think he did very well for himself. Unofficial 4.55 40 time when he was expected to run much slower than that. Wasn't invited to the combine or the Senior Bowl, and some of the belief was because he was an All-American linebacker and led the country in tackles, but the belief was he wasn't gonna run that well, and he wasn't a combine worthy prospect because of how slow he could be, and training locally with John Opfer, a former UB football player who trained Joe Andreessen last year, got him ready for that combine, and he did very well. He did pretty good. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but he did good in the other drills too, and probably took himself from a guy who wasn't going to get drafted to potential to be drafted, I think, in one of the very later rounds, and did very well for himself in that pro day. He's going to have that local, I don't know if you call it a pro day or local prospect workout at the Bills facility later. He's going to participate in that, and could be another Joe Andreessen, or maybe another team decides to take a look at him.
Sorry to derail you there from college basketball, but when you mentioned it, we keep that nice and bundled up with our football discussion. Okay,
yeah, no,
so
I mean that's a big
college
deal,
hoops.
not just for Sean Dolak and UB football, but he's a West Seneca East graduate, a local guy who had to walk on at UB and earn a scholarship, and then transferred to Utah State, but decided to transfer back to UB. The rules had to change just to make that allowable, and then had an All-American season, and now, I don't know if he's going to end up on the Bills, but he seems to be following the same path that Joe Andreessen did, so we could have two Buffalo Joes, one named Sean, Buffalo Sean, West Seneca Sean. Um, Basketball wise, yeah, St. Bonaventure lost this afternoon. UB women lost this afternoon. All of the Division I Western New York teams are now out of their conference tournaments. Season's over for most all of them. The UB women, I do believe, will get a WNIT opportunity. They did last year, and I think with their 25 wins and the season they had, we'll get that opportunity again. Bana men, I said all year this was NIT or bust after they turned down the NIT last year, and it was a bit controversial and led to a change in the AD's office. I don't know if they're going to get that opportunity this year. Maybe if enough other teams turn the NIT down, it could get turned to them. They have 22 wins, so they're not totally out of consideration, but I think their pecking order in the Atlantic 10 and not making a deep run here in the tournament, losing in the quarterfinals, could keep them on the outside of that. And I don't know if they're the type of team that will take a CBI bid or something like that. So it could be pretty much over for the Division I colleges other than the UB women. We sat next to each other at Damon's conference tournament games last year. They're the only undefeated team among 1,099 NCAA men's basketball teams.
I keeps getting different numbers about that. So here's just like a journalism little venting that I'll do. It shouldn't be that difficult to find the number of college basketball programs in the country. Now, Division I, you can find stats all over the place. I can't find a number for Division II schools or Division III schools that I am confident in. And then I'm also including, because I went to their stats and you can look at their rankings and stuff, the NAIA. There's no undefeated NAIA teams. In fact, you have to go down to JUCO Class B or whatever it is, Division II, to find another men's undefeated program. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. I was going to go all the way down to the Division IV or whatever it was in the JUCO. But anyway, I couldn't find a number. How many college basketball programs are in this country?
I'm a little bit with you too. I struggled to find numbers that I was really confident with. I found numbers that, I think I'm using Wikipedia as the source here, but that seem to be not quite official, but consensus numbers among multiple sources. and added that together. But you're right. Where it gets confusing is there's teams transitioning from Division II to Division I and probationary teams. And I think you might be getting a number that was the number last year, and now
I
this
came
year
up
is
with
different.
I said around 1,400, just because I didn't want to
Yeah.
give an exact number. And because when you go exact, then you're probably going to be wrong. So
Including NAIA you're talking about, right?
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think with NCAA, it's close to 400 Division III teams. It's close to 300 Division II teams, and it's 375-ish Division I teams, give or take. So it's 1,100, I think, is a nice round number of about where it is, but the exact number is a little hard to pin
And I
down.
think it's around 250 or 260 for the NAIA. And I wanted to include the NAIA because, hey, if you're going to include Division III, NAIA is kind of interchangeable with D2, I think, rough, like in the historical
Yeah.
sense, right? That's
Well,
about the level.
I think that's correct. And as I'm going to get into discussing here, so Damon has NCAA Tournament East Region games coming up tomorrow, Saturday, their first round game. If they keep winning, they'll play on Sunday and Tuesday. And those games will be played at Damon, whether Damon's in the games or not. The whole East Regional is being hosted at Lumsden Gymnasium, and that's, exciting for that program, and high level quality postseason March Madness basketball happening in Amherst, New York this week.
I'll be there tomorrow.
There's also
Are you going tomorrow?
championship basketball. I'll be there tomorrow. I will be missing Sunday's game while preparing for a colonoscopy. And if Damon keeps winning, I'll be there Tuesday night for the East Regional Final.
Mike McDonald better hope he doesn't get a colonoscopy. Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, championship basketball at a lower level, but good talent, I would say, is happening in Buffalo right now. The USCAA National Tournament, men's and women's, was hosted at Villa Maria College and ECC's Bert Flickinger Center, and the championship games are tonight, Friday night. The Villa men are in the championship game. The Bryan and Stratton women are in the championship game. So there's a doubleheader and teams that could win a national title. If if NAIA is comparable to Division II, I think USCAA is probably maybe more comparable to Division III, but it's got some good talent. It's maybe more comparable to, I would say, 4-year junior college. It's good players that for different reasons didn't make it into the NCAA level or bounce back from the NCAA level. Villa Maria starting point guard Justin Johnson was a player at Damon for a number of years, but he dealt with an illness and ended up going to play for his brother, who's the coach at Villa Maria, Des Randall. And, they have a number of players that were maybe under recruited out of high school and chose USCAA schools instead of Division III or instead of Division II. I do think they have some scholarship money. So it's a tough to pin down the level of basketball. They're mostly schools you never heard of, if not for the local schools. But getting to this championship level and the championship games, you're seeing pretty good teams with pretty good players and high stakes and high drama, I think, for the games.
I was told that I was going to have a lot of fun watching Damon play. I'll be honest, first half of that Staten Island game on Saturday was not great. They struggled a little bit. Staten Island had a point guard that was shooting the lights out, and Damon looked like they were in for a tough matchup at halftime. And then, bam, Damon wins by 33. Their biggest postseason victory, I think, I don't know what the stipulation was on that, if it was conference postseason victory or I don't know what it was, but 33 points after being in a tight game at halftime. And they were dunking and threes and passing the ball like crazy. They are not afraid to pass. They will make that one extra pass and, leave somebody wide open either for a three or, for a dunk. And yeah, they are a lot of fun to watch. They play great defense. That is a team. And I don't know if they're going to be able to go all the way. You take a look at the bracket and you see Nova Southeastern. They were the runner up last year. And then the champion 2 seasons ago, they average 106 points a game. Now, Damon is arguably the best defensive team in the country because opponents make only 37% of their shots from the floor. That's not 3-pointers. That's any shot from the floor. 37%. Yeah. So, and I think I have it here. Opponents average 63 points a game. So that's fourth in the country. But yeah, 37% from the floor. That could be a hell of a game. Now they wouldn't meet until the Elite Eight, which is in Evansville. But that Damon has potentially 3 home games before they get to that Elite Eight really paves the way for them to at least get within a couple of games, within what would it be 3 games of an undefeated championship season.
Yeah, I like Damon's chances of winning the East Regional here as the host. Um, Both being that they're undefeated and the number 1 team in the country and the number 1 seed in the East Regional, but also the teams they match up against. Bridgeport, their first round opponent, is a team that used to be in their league that they've beaten before, and I think they know how they can beat and they know how they match up. St. Thomas Aquinas, who they just beat in the conference title game for the 3rd time this season, could be their second round opponent. So I like their chances of beating them again, even though if it's hard to beat a team 3 times in 1 year, I don't know. Is it harder to beat them 4?
And St. Thomas Aquinas has that little bit of juju. They have beaten that was the team Damon could not beat for years. In fact, each of the last 4 years, St. Thomas Aquinas eliminated Damon from the East Coast Conference tournament.
Yep. And Pace is the team, the number 2 seed that Damon's, at least according to the chalk, would play in the regional final. And that's a team that they've been ranked ahead of all season. I think they have some common opponents that Damon's done better against. So I believe Damon would be favored, especially on their home floor, to win that game. When they get to Evansville, if they get to Evansville, the challenge is going to get a lot greater. And even though Damon's the number 1 team in the country, they don't have the number 1 RPI. I don't know if they're necessarily the favorite to win the national championship, but at that point, they'll be 30
when they
and
get
0.
there. They reseed there. So a lot of people don't know this.
Yep.
They reseed. So they'll probably be on the opposite side of the bracket as Nova Southeastern. So if they were to meet, probably in the championship.
Yeah, and I think Damon has a chance. I'm not saying they can't win the national championship, but it's going to get a lot harder as the tournament progresses. But that's the way it is. So we'll see how that goes. The Damon women have been that far. They've been to the Elite Eight. I don't like calling it the Elite Eight. We'll call it the national quarterfinals twice in the past 4 or 5 years. I think they've lost
the Elite
at that
Eight.
point.
The NCAA they have the copyright. They can call it what they can
you
call it.
You are correct about that. It is the NCAA has but when you start saying that, then there's all these Elite Eights and there's Final Four. All right, this will segue me into another thing I wanted to mention. Adding to the March Madness, the Buffalo Extreme ABA semi-professional basketball outfit playing in West Seneca, the home of Sean Dolak at XGen facility, a former roller hockey barn, which is a nice basketball facility now. They're playing regional playoff games this weekend, hosting in the ABA national tournament Saturday night. If they win,
is that Sweet 16?
There's 16 teams left, and if they win, then there'll be 8 teams left. An Elite Eight, and then
no, that's where I'll stop. That's where I agree with you, Jonah. It's copyright. It's a copywritten or trademarked, I should say. It's a trademarked thing, and the NCAA can call it Elite Eight. So Damon is playing in the NCAA tournament for Division II, and if it's called the Elite Eight, then it's the Elite Eight. However, local high schools and hockey teams and whatever else.
Yeah, I mean, the variety of sports I cover, I hear Elite Eight and Final Four get used for baseball and football and high school and everything, and
not true.
I think there's only one Final Four. I'd say there's 2 Final Fours. I think there's the men's and the women's Final Four. I don't apply Final Four, Elite Eight, and Sweet 16 to anything but the NCAA tournaments. I will grant men's and women's, but not Division II, not Division III.
Well,
semifinal is a pretty appropriate word for what we're talking about here. And
I wrote my
Buffalo
story.
Extreme have a chance to go to the ABA national semifinals in St. Louis if they win 2 home games this season. I believe they're ranked number 2 in the country for ABA teams. They've only lost 1 game all season, so they have a good chance of.
Now, what's the ABA league? How would you describe it?
Semi-professional. They have good players. Javon McRae, the all-time leading scorer for UB, is one of their best players. Howard Washington, who's a local player that played at Syracuse, is another one of their best players. And it's not the ABA of old, but it does have the lineage in terms of the red and white ball, and it's on paper connected to that. And it's semi-pro basketball. Most players would prefer to play overseas. The G League is definitely a higher level of basketball, but it's a next tier professional league for players that aren't going overseas and aren't in the NBA G League system.
Julius Erving is an alum.
He sure is.
Jonah, anything else you want to talk about before we wrap it up here?
I think that's it. High school basketball has gotten to the regional playoffs, state quarterfinals, if you will, Elite Eights, in 8 different classifications. Girls basketball regional start tonight at Buff State, 2 games tonight, 4 games tomorrow. Boys basketball playing on in Rochester. So I'll be hitting up a little bit of high school basketball, keeping my eye on the high school basketball going on in Rochester, heading over to ECC for the USCA games, then tomorrow with Damon after the Sabres. High school hockey semifinals.
You're a busy boy.
I got a lot going on, and then I'm going to be not doing much while I prepare for my colonoscopy. So I'll be doing a lot of things.
Wait. You will be doing a lot, actually.
But one thing
you won't be going anywhere.
Yeah.
Well, you'll be going a lot, but you won't be going anywhere.
Sure, right. And I'll have to miss a Damon game that I'd like to attend, but you know, I don't want to be rooting for the local team, but I'm hoping they win Sunday night, so there's a game Tuesday to attend and cover.
Well, Jonah, thanks for this. And thanks to everybody out there for checking out Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. Please give us a like, favorite, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, please subscribe on your platform of choice, whether it be your Amazons, your Spotify's, your iTunes's, your YouTube's, and we'll catch you next week. The financial needs of a business go beyond tax and attest services. That's why CTBK goes beyond accounting services and offers outsourced solutions through their affiliation with CFO Solutions Plus. These additional services allow clients to focus on their operational and long-term strategic goals. Trust CTBK's outsourced solutions to provide cost-effective, value-added financial services tailored to your company's needs. Call CTBK at 716-630-2400. Again, 716-630-2400. Or go to ctbk.com to learn more about CTBK's outsourced solution.